Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Real Estate Lab podcast. We have a special guest today. Listen, all of the news articles, everything online is talking about, will there be a crash? Is there a bubble? Let's kind of skip that today. And what we're going to focus on is what can buyers and sellers do if the market shifts? So that's going to be our focus for today. Eddie is our guest lender. Eddie, can you introduce yourself for a minute for everybody?
Well, what's going on, everyone? Ian, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. It's definitely a very important one. I am Eddie Fushang. I have been in the mortgage business since 2003. I've seen the up and down of the real estate cycle times. It's as you guys know, it's a very cyclical industry. And I have seen the crash. I've experienced the crash of 07, 08. And I can tell you from experience, this is nothing like that. So everybody who's worried about a massive crash, I can assure you from my experience, what we're dealing with right now is not the same situation that we've dealt with in 07, 08.
Randy, how's it going today?
It's going good. It's going good. The market is shifting right underneath our feet, but we've been preparing for that. My brokerage has weekly meetings and we discuss it and we make sure to prepare both buyers and sellers of what to do with that. Still not a bubble, but definitely a strong shift. And there's things to be done when that's happening. So
JJ, how you feel about that?
Yeah, I liked how you said shift. It's more of an adjustment. It's an adjustment. Things are changing. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about how we're going to adjust.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this a lot, and not that it's not going to shift in Austin, but that Austin will be impacted differently than a lot of the other places in the nation as well.
I would probably say the whole city is probably not going to be impacted as much as the rest of the nation as a state, but Austin for sure is definitely has a different, unique situation from the rest.
Say that again. You said Texas itself, you don't think is going to have an issue?
Texas in general, as a state, I don't think is going to have a huge impact as the rest of the nation would, but Austin for sure is going to have a very special, situation from the rest, just because of the massive influx of migration here to Texas from other states as well, if that makes sense.
Does anybody think that people are going to leave Texas?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people come and then they realize that there's more to take in about Texas, but that's just a very tiny percentage compared to how many people are coming in. So it's kind of almost a joke what I'm saying, but
Yeah, there is a natural attrition. There always has been, but I don't watch those numbers as much. I'm going to start paying close attention to them because I think that helps give us a read on how the numbers are going to be for the cycle here.
Even without looking at the numbers. Go ahead, Randy. I'm sorry.
Well, if they don't put a solution in place about property taxes, I think there's a big saying about that people will just settle into that's just what it is now with property taxes, and that very well could be true, especially now since we are doing this very strong shift. So that should really slow that appreciation down and help that out a lot. But at first, when we were having such a strong market and those property taxes came out, I definitely feel like a lot of people had to learn a lot about what that means to be a homeowner in Texas. So hopefully the shift in the market will help balance that out and not cause people to head out and find somewhere else.
Randy, you notice Dinosaur D said once people get their property tax bills, they'll leave. It is
we're on the same
100% correct. I think there will be people that can't handle this. Dinosaur D also says buyers can blow bubbles. I think that's true.
I just saw Dinosaur D's comment. Eddie's last name sounds like a property black belt master, Fu Shang. Well, I play Kung Fu, so that could help.
That's funny. I want to show this screen that you wanted us to pull up and talk about, Eddie. So
this actually will be very helpful
at the bottom so you can see it.
Yeah, my good friend Brian Cardenas actually is the one who wrote it. I want to give him credit because it was absolutely phenomenal piece. And Ian, if it's okay with you, can I just go over it very quick? And
yeah. Let's talk about it.
So really, this right here puts things in perspective. It's really food for thought for people to consider. Are we really in a bubble? The answer is absolutely not. And these are some numbers that I just want to go over. Brian very well put them. In 2007, there were
national numbers.
These are national numbers. You got it. Yeah, these are national numbers. In 2007, there were 3.8 million existing homes on the market. So compare that to 2012, there was only 2.3 million existing homes in the market. And then compare that to 2018, there was only 1.8 million homes in the market. And in 2022, we don't even have a million existing homes in the market, right? So it's 0.95 million. So the trends right here are showing that there are less supply, but the demand is increasing. As today, we have 14 million more household members than in 2007. So it just shows that there is a huge demand for housing and there's not enough supply. And it's economics 101, right? Supply and demand. There's not enough demand. There's a huge demand. It's much more than we had in 2007. And we have less supply than we did have in 2007. So that gives us a very clear indication that there is no bubble anytime soon. Absolutely not. So whoever is afraid of missing out or losing out on the sale of their home, it's definitely not the time yet, especially in Texas. It could be, different markets around the nation could be affected differently, but I don't think it's going to change in Texas anytime soon. So that was a very clear point. Now, the other piece that he brought up, which I think was, was very, very important for people to pay attention to, that we have big corporations right now buying single family residences, and they're basically accounting for 25 to 30% of the purchases. And that is causing the shortage of the inventory. And the other piece that I also want to bring up is we have the largest largest generation after the baby boomers entering the housing market, Generation Y and the rest of Generation X. So, combined all of that with the restrictions of lending today than it was back in 07, 08, is definitely causing a lot of less buyers to be qualified to buy homes. And obviously there's definitely going to be still very shortage of short inventory that we're dealing with. So the idea of having a real estate bubble anytime soon is just something that I don't see it happening probably within the next maybe couple of years. And I could be wrong. These are just opinions. They're not facts, but I'm just going based on personal experience and some of the information and the data that we have in front of us. I don't foresee it happening anytime soon.
Randy, JJ, have either of you been in the market back in 2008?
Not for me.
I was in the market.
I remember. I thought you
started
were.
getting into sales. Yeah.
And so do you agree with some of the points that Eddie's making?
Yeah, definitely. It's a different lending environment because that was a lot of BS loans just thrown out, which causes a lot of types of inflammatory economic situations. This is a little bit more it's a different type of inflation, but I think the values can hold. I think they're worth looking over. If we're talking about adjusting, you do have to look at the payment. I think people are still fighting for properties, but they're also recalibrating their payments.
The money is really there.
You said BS loans.
Ninja loans.
Let's go over that. Let's go over BS loans. What are some BS loans?
From 08?
JJ, do you want me jumping on this one since I was in the lending side from back then?
Yeah, my terminology.
So,
you could
back in the day, we actually have a joke about it in the industry. If you had a heartbeat, you were able to buy a home, right? And so there were stated income loans where you're basically just on a piece of paper stating your income. Literally, there's no verification or anything like that. There were definitely the bank statements loans are still available today. So they were always there, and they still do exist. But we're talking about mainly the no income, no doc loans. Literally, you are buying a house with your verbal, mention of your income. I make X dollar amount, and okay, well, go ahead and write it down, sign it, and we will take this as your income. And that what was going on back then. So you had a lot of people who had no business buying a home and owning a home, buying homes, and not to mention some other states. Texas was actually well protected because of the Texas equity laws that we have in here that's protecting consumers from ever basically borrowing more than 80% of the value of their home. So as a matter of fact, a lot of people were complaining about this law, but this law essentially saved a lot of Texans from basically being foreclosed on and losing their houses. And not to mention, it saved Texas from crashing as an economy. And what made Texas to this day the largest, economy in the United States is because of, the fact that we did not have massive foreclosures in the state. We did have, but we did not have massive foreclosures like in Florida, California, and Nevada, if you guys remember back in the day. Now, some of the other states like California, they were allowing people to borrow up to 110% of the value of the home. So literally, you're already, you're overextending your lending part of it, and they were allowing them to do something called negative amortization on their mortgage. Basically, you're only paying interest. That's it. You're only paying the interest payment. You're not paying any principal. So whatever you were not paying, it was just basically being added to the balance of the loan. So you take the loan at, let's say, $300,000, you now owe $340,000, 10 years later. So that was obviously causing a lot of the stress that we saw in 07, 08. So to JJ's point, the values were, how can I say them? They were not real. They were artificial values.
Yeah.
The money was fake. None of those loans were real. Nobody really had any of that money. Then they continued to pull the equity out of their homes and use them.
Right, and they just stopped making payments on them, and obviously the banks were basically now holding the bag, and that what caused the foreclosure wave that we saw in 07, 08. So the 07, 08 crash was caused because of the subprime loans that JJ was talking about. This time around, we don't have subprime loans. I mean, we do have some alternative lending aspects, but they're not the way that they were back in 07, 08. So I don't foresee what we saw in 07, 08 happening because of that.
Here's my question, both JJ and Randy. Do you have clients that have been asking about stated income loans?
No.
I don't think anybody knows about them. The newer generation don't know anything.
I've had a few people asking me about them, which is kind of interesting because I think there are a few lenders that are doing them. I don't think it's like mass adoption like it was before.
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, but that's important to know, right? I've also heard of ARMs. There's still a few ARMs here and there.
Well, ARMs they're a fine option if you know what you're doing and what you're signing up for. They're a fine solution for some people. There was just so many people out there that weren't paying attention in 07 and 08 and signing up for ARMs. They didn't understand what they were getting. All the offers and homes that have closed in the last 3 to 4 years have been high cash, so much cash. And it was definitely like a mass land grab because of the lowest interest rates ever. And so people were able to afford more house than they ever have before. And now that's gone. And so that's going to cause this enormous shift and definitely push a huge chunk of people out. But that does not change the fact that the appreciation of these homes shot off because we had massive demand, full of cash, real money offers, real lending. It's not the house of cards that you just did a great job explaining to us.
Keep in mind too that as high as interest rates, now people are complaining that we are approaching the sixes, or even in some situations we're over the sixes. This is still considered much lower than what rates were back in the mid 80s and the early 90s. People were buying houses with 18% mortgage, right? And they were still buying houses. So the idea of rates are going up and that's going to slow down the buying process or the purchase market. People are always going to be buying houses. It doesn't matter whether rates are 6%, 2%, 12%. I mean, people are still going to be buying houses, especially the newer generation that's coming up. As we were discussing, there is definitely massive demand and there's not enough inventory, and it will always be that way for a while.
So when let's go back to the stated income. Think about that, and now think about pre-quals. How many people have been able to get a house based on just a pre-qual lately? Not a pre-approval, but a pre-qualification. I don't think our buyers truly understood how important it was to get a pre-qual. I'm sorry, like not just a pre-qual, but to go all the way through a pre-approval. Do you think that's going to change? Do you think more people are going to be focusing on that?
Yes, and I need to add something very quick here. So back it used to be the pre-qual, which just for whoever is listening is not understanding the difference between a pre-qual and pre-approval. A pre-qual is you're talking to the loan officer, the lender, and you're just basically giving them verbal information about your situation. And
Which is a
based on
stated
that
income
verbal
loan.
information about your situation, whether you're telling me, okay, my credit score is this, I make X dollar amount, I have this amount of debt. Well, based on the information you're providing me on the phone, I can easily make an estimated calculation of how much you would qualify for based on that data. Does that make sense? That is a pre-qualification. Okay. Now, an actual pre-approval is different. You actually completed a loan application. We ran a credit report. We gathered your income docs. And based on the data that I gather from all of the information, I'm now confident enough to issue an actual pre-approval letter with my signature on it saying that you are pre-approved to buy this home. Now, there's a third option right now, which I think right now in our industry is absolutely mandated and is very important. And if you're trying to buy a house today and you're trying to make an offer, you absolutely cannot just submit a pre-approval letter now. We have to do something called a TBD approval. What a TBD approval is, so we've done already the pre-approval as a loan officer. I've already done the pre-approval. I've gathered your income docs, or pulled your credit report. I have your loan application. I have everything that I feel confident about. But I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to actually submit your file to the lender's underwriter for them to underwrite the file up front. So they're underwriting the file up front. Just the only thing missing is just the property, the contract, and the appraisal. So once we have the contract and the appraisal, your loan is already done, and you're signing the paperwork and you're closing. Does that make sense? So in my opinion, right now, especially in this industry, if you are buying a house and you don't have an actual TBD approval, you are definitely not putting yourself on the right path.
Randy, JJ, have you been seeing pre-approvals come in and they're not TBD?
So most of my clients will, of course, they'll get the pre-approval. And then I always, in my buyer's consultation, explain what a full credit approval will be, the TBD, and how beneficial that is to try to match up as much as you possibly can with these cash buyers. However, the market got really nuts there, kind of in this last spring and then the spring before of 2021 as well, where I started feeling like, I don't know if we can win a house in 120 days, to where I feel like I want you to talk with the lender about the full credit approval and really understand what we're doing with that, because it might take longer and that will expire. And so I just do my best to explain, like, yes, it gives you your best chances of winning in these competitive situations. However, sometimes it's taking longer on average than the 120 days. Now we're cooling back off, and I don't know if I would recommend a full credit approval at this time, just based off of what's been happening the last week or two. I'm still collecting data before I change up my buyer consultation on that, though.
JJ, you want to read some of these comments?
Dinosaur D, once people get their property tax bills, they'll leave.
That's going to be interesting.
I think, yeah. So for buyers out there, sellers too, there's going to be an adjustment, because the market does want a certain payment to be part of their income. That's what it is. And if you start messing around with, if taxes, property taxes, and interest rates are moving, they're going to write a different type of offer.
I want to ask a question based on that question, and this is kind of open. Because property taxes are getting higher in Texas, there were a lot of people that had a hard time in California back in 2008, lots of foreclosures and stuff, right? Well, there are also a lot of people that have relocated from California to here. Do you think that if there are mass foreclosures in California, that we're going to have a mass exodus of people in Texas going to California because now they can re-afford their homes? Does that make sense? If there's a lot of foreclosures in California, are there going to be Texans that are like, okay, now I'm going to take that shot?
Oh, okay. You're talking the other way around. No. I don't think that will happen.
Randy's like, I'm a Texas girl.
Maybe from Austin, where our values have kind of almost caught up with some of the lower premium California areas, but still, when you go to cities like Houston, Austin, and San Antonio, their inventory and their price ranges there are just so much more reasonable.
Well,
there's from those towns.
There's another piece to that as well, Randy. So in California, people, yes, they could absolutely take an opportunity for maybe one of those lower markets where the prices are similar to where we are here in Austin.
Yeah.
But the reality is the cost of living over there is still going to be much higher than it is in Texas, as well as the quality of life. The quality of life in majority of California, unless you're in the southern part of the state, it's nowhere near the quality of life we have in Texas. So I think
Well,
once people come to Texas, they are stuck in Texas.
that's super subjective. I
I
know
liked it.
a lot of
Really?
people who
think-
are like, man, I really like California, but the prices or but the politics. It's
Yeah.
just
Okay.
those buts. So if those buts were gone,
Well, here's
California
the
is
thing,
still the
Ian.
most beautiful weather
it's
ever.
a
Sorry, JJ.
beautiful
I
state.
think to your
It is.
point,
But
Ian,
go ahead, JJ.
Yeah. affordability is always the key. Like, national attention typically goes towards affordability, which may not be California, but somebody that thinks Austin's too expensive will look at a foreclosure in another area, and
Right.
it could be key. I think another factor though is jobs. Like, a lot of people have to be close to the Tesla plant, or they have to be close to the Facebook office or Amazon or whatever. So that's
I think
Well, hold
probably
on. We're going to get back to
Nevada.
the jobs thing.
Go
We
ahead.
got to come back to the jobs thing. Let's get through some of these other comments.
Dinosaur D. Do you guys think that values could go back by 10 to 15% due to inflation?
Not right now.
Affordability. I'm thinking based off of monthly repayments and tax bills.
I think we still
I guess
have.
another way to phrase this question is, what do you guys think it would take for the market to go back 10, 15%?
Oh, I've actually been kind of wondering that top of mind, especially after the Fed made some more news this week about 2 more rate hikes. It's like, well, geez, how many more can we do and handle? So if they keep pushing and pushing with that over the next couple of years, then that's a whole different ball game. For now, my guess is that will not be happening this year or next year. We will not be depreciating. We'll just be decelerating.
Let's all touch on that. JJ, what do you think?
I agree. The supply demand's still heavy, more flat than anything. I mean, this is also Austin. This is I feel like there's a lot of jobs coming into the picture, and this is to me, it's still a small town with like a bunch of jobs. So, I don't know if values are going to go back, but appreciation's not going to be as dramatically high.
How about you, Eddie? What do you think it would take for the market to go back down 10 to 15%?
I agree with JJ. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I think what would cause for this to happen is more basically homeowners are starting to freak out and start to feel the fear of losing out on the where the housing market is right now, and they're afraid that they're going to basically the burst will happen and they will not sell the house in time. So the only way for this to happen is you will have more homeowners basically have that fear of losing out to enter the selling market and put their houses for sale, and we'll start to see more houses available for sale, and that will probably cause that balance a little bit between the buyers and the sellers, and that could obviously slow down that shift that we are experiencing. And it'll slow it down. I wouldn't say it will decline prices. It will probably just slow it down a bit and flatten the curve a bit.
Yeah, I think people are so used to Austin having a really low inventory, and we're not normal. We haven't been normal in Austin for a long time, and I think even as we get back to normal, it won't adjust the prices. What it'll adjust is the benefits to the buyer and make it more fair conversation between the buyer and the seller. For example, if the buyer needs some kind of seller concessions, that'll come back, right? If there are repairs to negotiate, that'll come back. I wanted to point to this. Patrick says he's lived in both, and I think they are the same. I think, Randy, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so my husband is from Southern California, so I frequent that area several times a year. And then also I'm a Texan, but he and I did live in Oakland for about 5 years. And the reason that we have found a home here in Austin versus where I'm from originally in Houston is because it's a very similar feel, a lot of color, a lot of culture, a lot of, getting outside and enjoying your community. But then to kind of answer to everybody else's feelings, like, yeah, Oakland is crazy blue and that is very much in your face. And so this kind of red streak here that does run through Austin, because we are all Texans in the end, kind of helps cool it off a little bit. So it's very
Let me tell
similar.
you, I was just in San Diego and I was freezing. It was like 65 degrees. Everybody was talking about how it's a nice day. I was like, no, you're full of it. It's not a nice day at 65 with the wind blowing. No. Dinosaur D says, if butts are gone, Dinosaur D isn't interested.
No, that last comment he made is actually pretty, it's very reasonable. If they sell their house, don't they need a new one to live in? I know they're selling an investment property, that last one. That's a really good point. Yeah, but what most likely will happen, I mean, it's obviously going to be affecting them when they're buying the next house. But the reality is when people sell their houses and they're basically buying on they're usually upgrading to the next level, and home prices have a big impact as well on the market that we're in, right? So we would look at probably the $1 million home plus is not going to be as aggressive as it would be for like the 300s, 400s, 500,000 price range. But to the most part, it will probably flatten that curve for sure.
What do we see for loans for both regular consumers, investors, and what do we see for strategies for sellers in a changing market? This is all going back to our original, point of the discussion.
Right. Well, from the lending aspect of it, as you guys probably see in the news, without mentioning companies, some of the big mortgage companies in the nation are going through sale right now.
Yes, that's huge.
The industry is absolutely going through contraction right now.
Can you name some?
I guess I would rather not, just because of.
That's okay.
Yeah,
integrity first. That's good.
Yeah. Some companies are obviously very well known, and everybody knows who they are, and they're definitely being bought out. They're out for sale. Some of them already got sold out. Some of them are going through massive reduction of workforce. Some of them have laid off 80% plus of the workforce. The industry as a whole is obviously going through a contraction right now, and the ones that are strong, solid on, running a responsibility fiscal company, they're going to be the ones that are going to survive. And they have survived multiple crashes, and they still are standing. So that usually, not all companies are going to be going through that same issues. But the answer to the question is, are we going to see any restrictions on the lending aspect of it loosening anytime soon? I don't see that happening anytime soon. No. Which,
do you think they're going to hold on to their reins? And
yeah.
Hold on. Cream Pie Lars, yo Ian, I'm gonna go steal a bike later. Any advice on how to get caught? I don't know why you're asking me that, but that's really funny because I have my bike stolen. It's not really funny, but it's funny. Let's go to the next. Let's see. So the demand and supply equation stayed as is. Demand slightly outpacing supply. Would an increase in volume of transactions in the market cause prices to relax? I think we kind of answered that. I think what we all agreed upon is that it'll soften in that you won't see like crazy over asking offers, or you might see some seller concessions, but I don't know that you'll see prices being reduced by 15%. Go ahead.
No, and one thing I want to add to this part right here we were talking about. So now that interest rates are higher, less buyers are able to qualify for homes because their income hasn't changed, but rates went up. Now the monthly payment went up, so now their debt to income ratio has increased. So whatever they qualified for a month ago is not the same what they qualify for today, right? So the point I'm trying to make right here is, for sellers, when we were in the seller's market, for every one house that was for sale, you have 5 or 6 buyers for that one house competing with one another for that one house, and that was causing the prices to go up. Well, that will slow down a bit. Instead of now having 5, 6 buyers for the same house, you're going to have 1 or 2. So the competition is going to slow down a bit. Because there's going to be less qualified buyers now to buy these houses. So that could obviously help as well with the, again, we're not talking about a burst of a bubble. We're talking about just a slowdown of a curve. That's all it is.
There's an interesting statistic that came out last week too, from somebody that I follow, that, supply inventory, like kind of rushed onto the market. But when you dive into new construction versus resale, resale is actually still constricting. So that inventory is still tight and falling and dwindling back. Whereas the new construction, like I guess in Williamson County, they had 150% increase on their inventory as far as new construction goes. So
Mhm.
it might just be a really strong spring push of a backlog of builder inventory for right now. And then maybe once that is gone, it'll kind of go back to what Austin tends to really live in, especially before the pandemic crazy and the low interest rates, which is like this 2 to 3 month inventory of buyers need to compete with a couple other people, sellers get a good price for the home. And I think, in my opinion, everybody's happy. That would
Right.
be a great situation.
Do we see people with VA loans or FHA loans or even seller financing starting to make a comeback?
I really hope that that can be a gentle introduction back. Yeah, because of course you should be able to use whatever financing best suits your situation. And I just hate it whenever the people are backed into a corner in that way. So I certainly hope so. Whenever you're just competing against 2 to 3 other people, you'll eventually hit the house that will accept your financing.
Exactly.
JJ, what are your thoughts on that? That's an important one.
I mean, I wish they had better opportunities, but what I see is, I mean, my sellers like the cash offers. They still come in. Strong financing is definitely still there. High down payments, like that's still in the mix, and it's still grabbing a lot of seller attention. It sucks, but even more to Randy's point, regarding inventory, I have seen stats that when the economy, the building industry is building, the greater Austin area is one of the most fast building growth home building areas. I don't know if we're there, but talk to your agent, talk to your lender. We're in the field figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
We still have so much land. I want to go back and answer this question. You just got to be fast. That's it.
I'm still thinking about that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. I was like, how does he know?
Ian, I have a question for you guys, for you JJ and Randy. Do you guys foresee, obviously, a new growth opportunities for like maybe smaller towns that are going to become the new Round Rocks, the new Georgetowns, and the Austin, the new Huttos? Because I remember 5 years ago, you can definitely buy still houses in Hutto for like 160, 180,000. And obviously you can't even find anything right now below 350 and 400. So the point I'm trying to make right here is, do you guys see an opportunity for the smaller towns surrounding the big metros to basically grow and becomes, again, a new opportunity for those who are trying to buy houses, first-time home buyers, to get out of those big cities, because they know 3-5 years down the line, whatever they buy in the outer skirts are obviously going to become big towns 5-6 years from now. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah.
Ladies first. This is Texas.
I mean, yeah, I think that's all over. I actually just went to Houston to visit some friends and ran over a rock. My husband did. I didn't do it. And so we got our tire changed in Brenham by a delightful local company. And we drove to their area to have the tire changed, and all this beautiful land and ranch farms and everything. And he was like, oh, I love it here. I've been here my whole life, but they're building. It's crazy. And sure enough, past all these beautiful prairies, here comes this enormous new development of like 300 to 400 homes that are 3-2s. I'm like, well, that doesn't fit in here. And then you go back over to 290 when we're pulling out and heading off to Houston again, and strip center after strip center after strip center. It's just like, it's inevitable. It's coming for everybody. So from Austin specific, Taylor, Gerald, Maxwell even has a new construction community that got a lot of attention in the last couple of months because it was the last place to have under $300,000 priced home.
JJ?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I had coffee with a buddy of mine that just started working at Amazon, and he lives in San Antonio, and we're kind of doing the math like, okay, Amazon people get paid this much, Austin housing is this much. And then we start looking at these commutes and, where places are more affordable. So if you're watching this and you're looking at like where to ride the wave, you got to think about like these cities, these economic companies like Amazon. There's these like, I look at it like these concentric circles, like a ripple, right? Like this ripple effect. You throw like an Apple in Cedar Park, Samsung and Taylor, and you'll see the Gerald, there'll be some waves in Gerald a little bit. And it's just a matter of figuring out, like, is the Tesla scene going to go all the way to Taylor, or is Taylor just Samsung and Elgin,
Yeah.
so it's all there. Because you can't pay to live in Austin all the time. It's just not for everybody. But you got to work because the jobs are here again. So you're going to probably have to commute.
That's right.
I'm super stoked to see a lot of these live, work, play areas come to fruition.
Yeah, agreed.
So we just saw the mayor of Leander voted to keep, or I guess the citizens of Leander voted to keep Cap Metro in, right? So that's huge.
Nice.
We've got the Leander Springs project. We've got Velocity coming south. We've got there's one in Hutto. The co-op is being redeveloped. There's all of these little areas where you don't have to go to the city to enjoy the feel of a city, kind of the city life, which is basically around the corner. There's shopping, there's walking, and there are things to do. So that's the key. They're not all here yet. Once they're here, it all becomes Austin. People say Austin and they mean Georgetown. And it's funny because the flagship, I think we talked about this last week, flagship store for HEB is being built right now in Georgetown, right along 35. Biggest HEB. Everybody knows how Texans feel about HEB. Right? But there's a reason why a company like that would invest there. Right? It's really important to know that. And so, yeah, people, I mean, that's even a touristy thing. It's like going to Buc-ee's.
It is.
I like Georgetown.
Buc-ee's.
So we're like well past time. Eddie, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Very simple. TeamFushang.com. Team Fushang. FOOSHANG.com.
I love it. I don't want to cut anyone else off. Randy or Jay, did you have anything you want to share before we sign off?
No, I don't think so. Just keep an eye on the market. Talk to your realtor if you're trying to buy or sell here, because there's something changing just about every day.
And we'll be here again next week. Jay, did you have something?
Same thing with what Randy said, because I felt like we went over the theoretical stuff.
Yeah.
But you got to get tactical. Like, what does it mean? Does it mean Leander? Does it mean Gerald? What kind of offers, and what does the contract look like? Talk to your local specialist, because you know what's going on.
My recommendation would be anybody who is looking to purchase a home. If you're going to stay in it for a while, don't stress over the rates. Don't stress over being able to sell it in 2 years, because the market always shifts. But now more than ever, I think you should pay closer attention to the loan parameters. And what I mean by that is, if there are any funky things coming back, like if it's an ARM, or if they didn't ask you detailed questions about your loan, then they may not be the person for you. You need to really understand these numbers as we're moving into higher rates, higher taxes, and
people will need to reevaluate their lifestyle
options,
their living expenses.
Dinosaur D says, does Randy have any single twin sisters?
I have an older sister, and we are confused as twins often, and she's married. So it's all done. Family's all done.
Oh, man.
Dinosaur D.
Thanks, Kevin. Kevin says, great show. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you again next week on the Real Estate Lab.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for inviting me.